The following story broke the internet just 2 days ago.
I am a mythologist. I have seen giants, and they are now among us. I am a mythologist. It was a profession passed down from generation to generation, and I've always been interested in it. The old tales my dad used to tell me about fairies, cyclops, and big giant wolves always had me on edge. There was something he never spoke about, however. That was giants. Whenever I brought up the giants, he would clearly change from cheerful to stone cold, even fearful at times. One night, my dad came home drunk. I could smell the whiskey on his breath from 10 feet away. He was clearly in a state of panic, as the only detail I remember vividly were his big eyes. They were almost black. When it was time for me to sleep, I asked him for some tales, and no matter how mad he was, he always told me something I had never heard of. I missed those times. He was telling me a story about an ancient fairy garden that produces dreams when I brought up giants. Without a single word, he switched out the lights and left my room, leaving me to soak in the eeriness of if he was mad or not. When Dad left, I was around 16. He one day went on a journey to Ireland because they found evidence of something. I don't know exactly what it was, but his note suggested it was something to do with angels. There were very detailed illustrations of them and how they looked, and it was completely different to what I could have expected an angel to look like. It had more than two legs. Wings were small, like a baby bird's, but the most striking details were the eyes. They had the same big black eyes, like the night my father had when he was drunk. I felt uncomfortable looking at it. When I got out of college, I had a degree in mythology. I had a few friends who were interested, but most either became something else or a partner in the field, like archaeology. One night, while at home, I was doing some research when I got a call from one of these friends. I'll call him Troy. He was clearly frantic, as if he was in a hurry. That's when he asked me for help. Apparently, on one of the digs, they had found evidence of something that needed to be identified. My first and most obvious question was, why would you need a mythologist for that? He avoided it and said they could fly me out tomorrow. This was in Afghanistan, but it was in a more remote or desolated area of it. Since this was the case, I wasn't too fearful of any potential threats, and after some time of thinking, I agreed, and I was flown out in time no less than when the sun had fully rose the next morning. When I stepped onto the dry, sandy landscape of the country, I was shocked. The sun was blazing so hot it felt like I would be reduced to ash. I felt uncomfortable, and I moved to the spot where I was meant to be picked up. When the pickup arrived, I hopped in, and after a few hours of treacherous heat and sandy roads, we finally arrived to a very large dig site. There were scientists, journalists, but most confusing of all, there were armed guards. As I shuffled over, Troy greeted me with a tight hug and gestured for me to follow him, so I did. We walked into one of the many research tents, and there were very old illustrations, books, and more. But the one thing that caught my eye was a bottle that was waxed shut with a rolled up piece of paper inside. I looked at it, and he caught my gaze and explained, "Yeah, we found that at the site. We think it might be a codex or a dating. If we are right and able to figure out what it says, it could change quite a lot about the history of this place. All the things we wondered could now be proven." Then I asked the burning question, "Why do you need me then?" A massive lump formed in his throat as he walked out, me trailing closely behind. When we arrived to the main attraction, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. In this big, rectangular-like hole stood a skeleton. This skeleton was no less than 12 feet tall and almost 5 feet wide. I almost thought this was a joke or an animal, till I saw the very clearly blue oxidized copper spear and massive iron brace in with the skeleton. Then flashed in my mind the memories of my father's avoidance to talk about the giants. As a mythologist, you don't actually think any of this is possible. It's mostly just cultural study. By the time I had looked at this thing long enough, it was very dark, around 11 p.m., so we all headed to bed. The only thing I remember thinking is, was this real? Have we found evidence of giants? And so I passed out in the pool of my own thoughts. When I awoke, I had heard lots of commotion, and most confusingly, the sounds of guns being loaded. I sprung out of bed, rushing to see that the skeleton had disappeared, but even worse, so had Troy. He was absolutely nowhere to be seen. I heard people talking, then spotted a crowd up ahead, so I followed. When I stood to see what they saw, I was shocked. There were massive trails of clear drag marks, but also there were footprints, at least 4 feet in length. The drag marks led into a valley of mounds, and so we planned to follow them. Our main thought was that Troy had taken the body and planned to sell it. When I went into his tent, everything was clearly, frantically thrown around, as if he had scampered to get out of bed quickly. But also, the bottle with the message was gone. I caught up with the group, and as we followed the trails, I started to become anxious, fearful even. Something about this wasn't right. How could he have moved that massive skeleton out of that pit and not have made any noise? Nevertheless, the weight of it, the spear and the brace was also gone. How was any of this possible? When the trail started to shift, it went up a ramp-like slope into the top portions of these mounds. They were around 100 to 500 meters tall. When we followed them, we arrived at a cave, and without any hesitation, the group shuffled in. I stood there in shock, but before I could think, my legs did for me, and I moved in. The first thing I noticed was the smell. It was rancid, worse than death. But the second thing was the darkness. I had a torch with me, but before I lit it, I felt helpless. If I got lost in there without a torch, I would never make it out. I would be forced to die slowly, constricted by only the boundaries of these rocky walls. When I lit the room, I saw the group was a bit ahead, so I jogged to catch up. When I hit a loose rock, and it bounced into the wall, making a loud echo. Then we heard it. Loud, heavy footsteps came from right in front of the group. The first thought was a wild animal, and so a lot of us rushed out. When we made it, we heard yelling and screaming. Then the noise started, the muffle, till it all stopped. Among the eerie silence, we heard what sounded like something eating, a predator feeding on its prey. One of the many armed guards quickly loaded his rifle, and the sounds suddenly stopped again. The footsteps, slow this time, came towards us, and the guards immediately pulled their weapons up, waiting. Then slowly formed out of the darkness a massive shape of a human. From even that, I could tell it was at least 15 feet, maybe more. Then it emerged. From that cave, a massive axe swung out, striking one of the guards in the body, sending him off the mountain. There were no screams. He was gone instantly. The enormous figure emerged, and what I saw will be engraved in my memory as if etched in stone. It stood tall, almost 20 feet. Its skin was a pale, stark gray, and its features were strict. It had black hair, deep eyes sunken into its head, far more than naturally should. Its nose was slightly cut off, and it had horrendous scars on its face. But its mouth is what I remembered the most. It had a grin with thousands of tiny razor-sharp teeth, and there were blood on them. It was primal, a supernatural being that should not have existed. Outlining his body were bones. He used rags to tie them onto him. It was wearing the skeleton of what we had extracted, as if it was a trophy. But what still gives me nightmares today was what hung off its body. There were twin ropes with parts mounted on them like trophies. They were his friends. The guards opened fire on the beast as it let out a deep, guttural roar, almost like the screech of metal. I watched as it grabbed the closest person, one of the guards, and without any trouble, the beast squeezed. The guard turned to nothing. For that brief moment, it was distracted, so I ran beneath its feet as it dropped his lifeless body to the ground. I ran and ran till I found where it had been hiding. There was a small cavern, and there stood a bunch of dead grass, sticks, and the like. I didn't know how this thing got grass in the middle of Afghanistan, but I didn't care. As I scanned his lair with my torch, I spotted it. The bottle, with the wax sealing it closed and the letter inside. It was easy to break, and I figured, in my last moments, I would read it. This is what it read. To those who happen to find this, I am dead. I am not the body of the monster that has been found. I am rather the man by the name of Lucas Hitchwood. What you have dug up is a giant, a massive beast that resides in all places, but is mostly considered fantasy. Lucas Hitchwood was my father's name. The note was smeared in ink and was clearly written in a hurry. I looked at the bottle and noticed something. Of course, it was an old whiskey bottle. Everything finally clicked. He never went to Ireland. He went here. He knew they existed. As I said this more, gunshots echoed and screams emanated from the pitch dark my torch couldn't illuminate. In a hurry, I ran to a wall and saw something shiny. There was a watch, a silver watch, which I recognized. It was my father's. I saw bones scattered and I realized he had died here. I sobbed like a baby till the shots stopped. I thought it was coming back, then I heard my name being called. I rushed out to see the beast had fallen dead. Its eyes lay open to reveal the same dark sunken voids I had seen just moments ago. That was the last I remembered, the black voids of that thing's eyes. Then I passed out. I woke in the hospital and was told I had suffered from intense stress, which caused the fainting. As the nurse walked out, two men in suits walked in. I had heard of this, the men in black. What you saw that day is something that very few have ever seen. We have contacted who you work for and have managed to get you a sum of money in exchange for your sworn secrecy. A contract will be provided for this soon. I was paid $300,000 to be quiet. I was never to speak about the horrors I witnessed that day. Now, when I walk around the streets, I notice more black eyes staring at me. It's not long before I join my dad. The stress has been too much. I'm considering just giving up and leaving this world in peace. Wow, fam. What a hell of a story. My girlfriend had stumbled upon it. It was posted just 2 days ago to the internet. It's probably going to be heard more after this, but you already know. You heard it here first. So, what do y'all think? Crazy stuff, right? His dad was a mythologist, told him all these crazy stories, but always avoided the giants. Left for a trip to Ireland, but he ended up in the same place his dad actually went. Crazy. What I find to be the most fascinating about these stories is they seem to be located or take place in the Middle East, Kandahar, Afghanistan area. And these things epitomize what the Bible called the fallen, the abominations. Regardless of this story's validity, whether it's true or not, I have no idea. But an awesome account nevertheless. And it's something that we cannot write off. As soon as I heard it, I knew I had to share it with y'all. So I hope you enjoyed. Let me know what you guys think in the comments about this one. Wild. His dad left the bottle. Just awesome. Again, let me know what you think. Stay in love, stay in the light, stay tuned. I am out.